The sun was hot that afternoon as Sarah tied her baby girls, Emma and Ella, to her chest with a faded wrapper. They were barely a month old, and their cries were soft and weak from hunger. Sarah hadn't eaten since the night before. Her breast milk was drying up. She sighed, wiped the sweat off her forehead, and thought of her husband, George, who had left the house in the morning without a word. She assumed he had gone to look for work, though he hadn't said where. Looking down at her daughters, she whispered, "Don't worry, my darlings. Mama will find something for us today." Sarah thought of Anita, her best friend since secondary school, who lived just 2 streets away. Adjusting the wrapper tightly around her babies, she began the short walk to Anita's house, hoping for a little money to buy food. She knocked on the wooden door, but when no one answered and finding it unlocked, she stepped in softly, calling out, "Anita?" Laughter from the bedroom caught her attention. A familiar voice, "George?" Heart pounding, Sarah tiptoed closer, her baby stirring against her chest. Through the slightly open door, she saw George, half naked, laughing and drinking malt on the bed with Anita, who wore only a short wrapper. They were sharing meat, laughing like carefree children. George spotted Sarah first, and, instead of showing shame, snapped, "Why are you barging in like a madwoman?" Anita didn't bother to cover herself and hissed, "Didn't your mother teach you to knock?" Frozen, Sarah's lips trembled, but no words came out. Her babies started crying. Finally, she whispered, "So this is why you've been disappearing all day. George, our daughters are hungry. I came to Anita for help, and this is what I find." George rolled his eyes and laughed mockingly, blaming Sarah for giving birth to 2 girls instead of a boy. Anita, smiling cruelly, chimed in that Sarah should feel lucky George stayed this long. When Sarah reminded George their daughters were just babies, he sneered, saying the doctor had told them she could have no more children, like a spoon that couldn't fetch soup, useless. As Anita laughed, George added that he needed a real woman who could bear sons. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as George insulted her appearance, her poverty, her very existence. Anita casually sipped her drink, betraying the years of friendship without a second thought. Clutching her crying babies closer, Sarah said quietly, "I didn't come to beg for love. I came to feed my children. But God is watching." George mocked her again, telling her to ask God for rice and beans. Saying no more, Sarah turned and walked out, the sun scorching her skin, but the fire in her heart burning hotter. She wandered home with no clear direction, knowing only that she was truly on her own now, with 2 helpless little girls depending entirely on her. Back in their one-room apartment, Sarah sat on the cracked floor. The fan hadn't worked in months, the zinc roof leaked, and the stove was cold and empty. But something inside her shifted. She kissed her babies' foreheads and whispered, "Your father may have turned his back on us, but I will never turn mine. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I promise you both, Emma and Ella, I will give you a good life, even if it means selling the roof over our heads." 5 years later, Sarah watched from a wooden bench as Emma and Ella, now tall, smart, and full of life, chased each other around the dusty compound. Their laughter was loud, innocent, and pure. Sarah smiled, but her heart was heavy. It was time to enroll them in school, something she had delayed too long. Gathering their old birth certificates and the bag of Sunday clothes, she prepared to seek help. She had a little savings from washing clothes, but not enough for school fees. She decided to approach Mr. Johnson, an old family friend who lived nearby and was rumored to have some influence and wealth. Dressing neatly in her cleanest wrapper, Sarah walked to his house. Mr. Johnson welcomed her with an inappropriate grin and compliments on her appearance. She politely stated her reason for coming, explaining her desire to send Emma and Ella to school. Mr. Johnson chuckled dismissively, questioning why she would waste money on educating girls who would only end up married. When Sarah firmly insisted on her daughter's right to education, he offered financial help, but at a price. With a sly smile, he proposed that Sarah become his 5th wife, offering money, clothes, and a better house in exchange for her body. Furious and disgusted, Sarah rejected him outright, calling out the truth about his poverty and the misery of his existing wives. She stormed out with her dignity intact, her heart burning but her spirit unbroken. That night, she lay awake thinking. By dawn, she had made a decision. She would sell the only thing she had left, the small house her father built. Though it broke her heart to let go of it, her daughter's future mattered more. A rough-looking buyer came, inspected the crumbling walls and leaky roof, and handed her a brown envelope. Without counting the money, Sarah thanked him and walked away from the house that had once been her entire world. Homeless but not hopeless, she used the money to pay for Emma and Ella's schooling all the way to university. They moved into an abandoned, unfinished building behind the market, living among cement blocks and broken concrete. They caught rainwater in bowls, slept on bare floors, and covered themselves with worn curtains. Sarah worked any job she could find, washing, cleaning, carrying loads, to keep her daughters fed. Sometimes she came home bruised, wet, and exhausted, but she always made sure her girls had something to eat, even if it was just soaked Gary and groundnuts. One evening, as Sarah washed clothes near the abandoned building, an old woman passing by stopped and stared. She asked if Sarah and her daughters truly lived there. When Sarah confirmed, the woman looked at the twins, dusty and worn but bright-eyed and full of determination. Then, with kindness that brought Sarah to her knees, the woman offered her a place to stay. Her large house was empty, and Sarah and her daughters could stay as long as they needed, rent-free. Sarah dropped the clothes in her hands, overwhelmed, and asked, "Ma, are you serious?" The woman nodded, smiling. "God touched my heart," she said simply. Sarah's heart filled with peace every time she looked at her daughters, and Sarah's eyes brimmed with tears as she dropped to her knees, blessing the kind old woman who had taken them in. From that day forward, they lived in the old woman's compound, a simple 3-bedroom house with water, a small kitchen, and a garden behind it. The woman treated Sarah and her girls like family, giving them a room, cooking with them, praying with them, and supporting the girls in every way she could. Years passed, and Emma and Ella grew into beautiful, brilliant young women, passing every class with flying colors. Emma dreamed of becoming a lawyer, and Ella shared the same dream. Together they promised to chase it. The house became filled with books, laughter, and late-night reading sessions. Before they knew it, 20 years had passed. Sarah, now older with gray strands in her hair and deeper lines on her face, still carried pride in her sparkling eyes whenever she looked at her daughters. On the day they graduated from university, both girls wore black gowns and hats, walking across the stage with bright smiles as the best students in their department, law. After the ceremony, they rushed home, certificates in hand, and found Sarah waiting outside, tears streaming down her face. They fell to their knees and embraced her tightly, crying, "Mama, we made it!" Sarah, overcome with emotion, kissed their faces and whispered, "You both made me the proudest mother alive." But even in their joy, a small sadness lingered. The kind woman who had saved them had passed away a year earlier. "She should have been here," Emma said softly. "She would have loved this day," Ella added. Sarah nodded, her heart heavy with gratitude. "She didn't just give us a house, she gave us hope and family when we had none. She'll always live in our hearts." That night, they lit a candle and placed it by her favorite flower in the garden, holding hands and praying for the woman who saved them, for the man who abandoned them, and for all single mothers still fighting silently. Meanwhile, George sat in a small rented apartment, looking far older than his years. His once bold shoulders were bent, and his eyes were tired. After running errands for a man half his age, he heard something that broke him further. At the barber shop, men were discussing how Sarah's twin daughters had graduated as top lawyers, their names proudly in the newspaper. George pretended not to hear, but every word echoed painfully. His daughters, Emma and Ella, successful, brilliant, out of his reach. Shame rose hotly in his chest. When he returned home, Anita, the woman he had chosen over Sarah, stormed into the room, shouting insults. She mocked his uselessness, berated him for being lazy, and called him a foolish old man. Finally, George stood up and said what he had buried for years: she had ruined his life. Furious, He called her out for her lies, for sleeping around, and for destroying what was left of his dignity. Anita laughed cruelly, reminding him that he had chosen her. George, broken, admitted that he had left a queen for an empty, cursed life. Lowering his voice, he whispered the words that burned deepest. His daughters were now lawyers, beautiful, smart, everything he could have been proud of, and he had no part in it. Anita, unbothered, walked away laughing. 2 days later, George could no longer endure living under Anita's roof. When she demanded an apology for his embarrassment in front of her sugar daddy, George refused. He packed his few belongings and walked out of the door, finally leaving behind his greatest mistake. That night, Anita prepared for Chief Roland's arrival, wearing a red fitted gown and cooking a lavish meal. Chief Roland, wealthy and proud, arrived, but Anita, fueled by greed and impatience, insulted him for not fulfilling his promises. Furious, he slapped her, and when Anita pushed back, he shoved her violently. Her head hit the table's edge. She didn't move again. In a panic, Chief Roland called the police, falsely blaming George for her death before fleeing the scene. George, meanwhile, was staying quietly at a friend's house, trying to rebuild what little life he had left, when police burst in, guns drawn. Accused of Anita's murder, George protested desperately, but it was no use. The system had already been bribed. In a swift, cruel trial, George was sentenced to death by hanging within 60 days. He wept bitterly in prison, abandoned, helpless, full of regret. One day, his friend Mark visited him, and George, broken, begged him to find Sarah and the girls to plead for their forgiveness. Mark, heartbroken, promised to try. Mark nervously walked into the tall law firm building, clutching his cap in his hand. He approached the receptionist and asked for Ella. After a brief wait, he was directed to her office. Ella, sharp and beautiful in her suit, greeted him with professional coolness, unaware of the storm he carried inside. She frowned and leaned back in her chair. "So you came to talk to me about him?" She folded her arms. "Why? What business do I have with a man who walked out on me, our mother, and my twin sister when we were just babies? Where were you, old stranger?" Mark nodded sadly. I know you don't know me, and I have no right to be here. But your father is in prison. He has been sentenced to death. He was accused wrongly." Ella's eyes didn't blink. "He didn't kill Anita," Mark said quickly. "Someone else did. But he's the one paying for it." Ella remained quiet. "He asked me for only one thing," Mark continued. "Not to save him, just to tell you and your sister that he's sorry. That he doesn't want to die without your forgiveness." Ella stood up from her chair. "Forgiveness?" Mark nodded. "Yes." She shook her head slowly. "That man abandoned our mother. Left her with newborn babies. Called her useless. Walked out of our lives like we meant nothing." "I know," Mark said gently. "And I'm not here to defend what he did. It was wrong. Very wrong. But he is broken now. Lost. Afraid. And for once, he is truly sorry." Ella walked to the window, facing away. "My mother suffered," she cried. "She starved. She worked day and night for us. That man never came back. He never asked how we were doing. He never even sent a grain of rice." Mark didn't speak. He gave her time. After a long pause, Ella spoke softly. "And now after all these years he's in trouble, and he wants us to forgive him?" Mark's voice was low. "He's not asking for help. He's asking for peace before he dies. I know it's hard. I know it may even feel unfair. But I promised him I would try." Ella turned around, her eyes watery. "It's hard. Too hard." "I understand," Mark said. "You don't need to decide now. I only ask, talk to your sister. Talk to your mother. If nothing changes, I'll understand." She looked at Mark for a long moment, then said, "Come back in 2 weeks. I'll speak to my family before then." Mark nodded quickly. "Thank you. That's all I ask." As he turned to leave, Ella spoke again. Tell him nothing is promised. I can't promise anything. Mark stopped at the door. I will. But thank you for not chasing me out. She didn't answer. She just stared at her table in silence. As Mark left the building, he looked up at the sky and sighed. Lord, please touch their hearts. Ella sat at the edge of her mother's bed. Emma stood near the window with her arms folded. Sarah was sitting on a plastic chair, holding her glasses and looking down. The room was quiet. Heavy. Mom, Ella said softly. We need to talk. Sarah looked up, already sensing what the conversation was about. It's about Dad, Emma added. Sarah stood up quickly. Don't call him that. He lost the right to be called that years ago. Mom, please, Ella said. Just listen. Sarah shook her head. No. There's nothing to listen to. That man hurt me. He hurt you. He left us in the worst way. He said things I can never forget. He's in prison now, Ella said. He's been sentenced to death. He was accused wrongly. Sarah was quiet. He didn't kill Anita, Emma continued. One of her sugar daddies did. But he's taking the blame. He's poor. He has no one. He has nothing. He needs our forgiveness now. I don't care, Sarah said sharply. He left me when I was bleeding, when I had nothing, when I was carrying 2 babies. And now he wants my forgiveness? He's not asking you to fight for him, Ella said. He just wants to rest in peace. He wants to say sorry. Sarah's lips trembled. For years I cried myself to sleep. I worked with wounds on my hands and sores on my feet. I begged strangers to feed you too. Where was he? Tears filled her eyes. I carried shame, hunger, pain, but I carried it with pride because I refused to give up on you. So no, I will never forgive that man. Mom, Emma said, her voice breaking. We know you're hurt. We are too. He's not the same man anymore. He's broken. He cries. He regrets. And he's begging, not for a second chance, just for peace before he dies. Sarah stood still. Her eyes were full. Her hands shook. The girls knelt before her. Mom, please, Ella whispered. Let him go with peace. Please, Mom, Emma added. We're not doing it for him. We're doing it for you, so you don't carry this pain forever. Sarah looked at her daughters. Her heart couldn't fight anymore. She closed her eyes and said the words slowly. Fine. We will go. I forgive him. Ella and Emma hugged her tightly, all of them crying together. The next day, they arrived at the prison. George sat alone in his cell, thin and tired, his head bowed, hands wrapped around his knees. The guards called his name, and he barely responded. He didn't care anymore. He thought no one would ever come. When he was led to the visitors' area and looked through the thick bars, his heart skipped. There she was, Sarah. His mouth opened but no words came out. He stared at her like he had seen a ghost. Tears welled up in his eyes. Sarah, he whispered. Sarah didn't speak immediately. She stood still, arms folded. George dropped to his knees. I didn't think. I never thought you would come. Sarah looked at him, eyes filled with quiet pain. She pointed to the 2 young women standing beside her. Look at them, she said. I brought your daughters. George slowly lifted his head and looked at them. He blinked, confused, overwhelmed. These are. His lips shook. Yes, Sarah said. These are the same girls you left when they were just babies. You walked out on us. You never came back. But I raised them. I kept my promise. George broke down completely. He buried his face in his hands and sobbed. God forgive me. I don't deserve to see them. I don't deserve anything. Ella and Emma stood still. It was the first time they had seen their father. Emma took a small step forward. We heard what happened, she said. George didn't lift his head. I didn't kill her. But maybe I deserve this pain. Maybe this is my punishment for what I did to your mother, to you. Sarah's voice was calm but heavy. You don't get to decide your punishment, George. You made your choices. But today, we made ours. George looked up slowly. I forgive you, Sarah said. Not because it's easy. Not because you changed. But because I refuse to carry your mistake any longer. Ella and Emma moved closer to the bars. We forgive you too, Ella said, her voice shaking. Not for what you did, but so we can be free. George cried like a child. I thought I would die with this shame in my heart. But now I can breathe. Even if I die, I can go in peace. No, Father, Emma said gently. You're not going to die. Not like this. George looked up, shocked. We're lawyers, Ella said. And now we're going to fight for you. George covered his face again, overwhelmed. You would still fight for me after all I did? Yes, Sarah said quietly. Because no one deserves to die for a crime they didn't commit. And because our daughters believe in justice. George dropped his head again. Thank you. Thank you. It was the first time in many years he felt the weight of love again, not because he earned it, but because they chose to give it. After that emotional prison visit, Ella and Emma didn't waste time. They wiped their tears and got to work. They met with a senior lawyer who helped them reopen their father's case. They requested access to files, reports, and police records. They read everything and found many things that didn't make sense. Look at this, Emma said, pointing to the report. No fingerprints taken. No photos from the crime scene. Just a rushed confession. Ella frowned. He didn't even confess. The police just wrote what they were told. It became clear someone powerful had covered the truth. But Ella and Emma were not afraid. They were determined. They returned to the street where Anita lived. They went from house to house, asking questions, hoping someone had seen something. Then one old woman told them. Check Mr. Phillip. He has a CCTV camera outside his house. I don't know if it still works, but it faces Anita's gate. That was their first real hope. They rushed to Mr. Phillip's house. He was a retired teacher, kind and helpful. When they asked about the camera, he nodded. Yes, it works. I don't check it often, but it records everything. He gave them the footage from the day Anita died. Back at the office, they played the video, their hearts beating fast. And there it was, clear as day. Chief Rowland was seen entering Anita's house in the afternoon. Hours later, he came out alone, looking nervous, glancing around. Emma paused the video. There. That's him leaving the scene. Ella sat back and took a deep breath. We've got him. They took the footage straight to the police and also filed it in court as new evidence. The story spread fast. Newspapers, TV stations, and social media picked it up. People were shocked. How could they have sentenced an innocent man? The police had no choice. Chief Rowland was arrested and brought to court. This time, there was no escape. The judge watched the CCTV video. The truth could not be denied. Chief Rowland stood in silence, his head down. His lawyer had nothing to say. The judge shook his head. You tried to shift your crime to an innocent man. You took a life and then tried to destroy another. He looked at the courtroom and said clearly, Chief Rowland, for the murder of Anita Raymond and for framing an innocent man, you are sentenced to life imprisonment. The room was silent for a moment, then filled with quiet cries of relief. George was declared innocent and released from prison the next day. When he stepped outside, he saw Sarah, Ella, and Emma waiting for him. He dropped to his knees. Thank you, he said. Thank you for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. Sarah helped him up. Let's go home. And for the first time in many years, George walked not as a prisoner, not as a broken man, but as a father who had been given a second chance. Dear viewers, what lessons did you take away from this dramatic tale? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, share it with friends, and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. Thanks for watching, and stay blessed.